Without school as a distraction, nothing kept me from feeling the acute loneliness from being the last living member of my family. When a marketing assistant position at a corporation in Seattle opened up, I applied immediately. Within days, I had an interview, and I managed to convince myself it was my destiny calling me out west. Fate, I'd easily convinced myself, was telling me I needed to be in Seattle. I went through the interview process, and instead of offering me a position like I was sure would happen, the company was acquired by another corporation. I read the papers afterwards and learned it was a hostile takeover. From the articles I read, it seemed the company was just as surprised to find themselves out of business as I was to find myself without a job offer. That's how, at 22 years old, I found myself with a diploma, one duffel bag full of clothes, and nothing else. I'd given up the room I was renting back in Carbondale, Illinois, so I didn't even have a home to go back to. Besides, even if I went back to Illinois, I would have had to face the same situation, so I decided to stay and make Seattle my home. Since then, I'd done a variety of jobs trying to stay afloat. I'd even had my cliché turn as a barista, but considering I wasn't a coffee drinker, I didn't last long. Eventually, I found the waitressing job I had now. Unfortunately, living in the city was expensive, and even with working full-time, I was barely making it. If the owner of the diner I worked at hadn't taken pity on me and started giving me leftovers after every shift, I wouldn't be making it at all. They were kind, and I knew they'd root for me if I managed to find a job that paid more money. After all, I was far from being the only person in Seattle struggling to make ends meet, and they'd have multiple applicants to fill my position. I gave up on folding the paper, leaving it in a sort of square-shaped ball, and rose to check on my tables. The bell over the door dinged while I was fighting with the paper, and I hurried to greet the new customer. There were a few times in my 23 years when I felt the ground shake under my feet. I tried not to be superstitious because it seemed illogical to hold such unscientific beliefs, but I was also taught to listen to my gut. Every time I'd had this feeling in the past, my life changed. It happened the day my mama died, the day I lost my grandma, but sometimes it occurred for good things, too. When my acceptance letter and scholarship offer came, I was nearly knocked off my feet. There hadn't been enough of the good times for me to be sure, but I knew the winds were changing. Only time would tell what they'd blow my way. I grabbed a menu and hustled over to take his drink order. "Good morning, sir. Can I get you something to drink?" "Please, look up," I silently begged. There was something about him. An aura of power, yes, but the suit helped with that. His strong, square jaw and straight nose were softened by dark blonde hair that waved slightly in the front. A moment of his attention would be enough for me. I knew all about storing away precious moments. Instead, he opened a paper and began to peruse the day's headlines. "A cup of coffee, black, please." My stomach sank. For the smallest fraction of a second, I envisioned him sweeping me off my feet and holding me when I was too tired to hang on alone. It was a silly fantasy. Apparently, my ability to daydream hadn't disappeared. Shaking myself out of the weird reverie, I nodded. He didn't look up, so it was a useless gesture. Of course I was invisible to him. I'd always been invisible. Obviously, that wasn't going to change. The diner was pretty deserted for a Thursday morning, which didn't bode well for my tips for the day. I set the carafe down on the table along with a ceramic mug. After I poured his coffee, I pulled my order pad out of my apron. "Have you decided what you wanted?" He folded the paper expertly, which somehow symbolized the divide between his world and mine. He was cultured and confident. I was awkward and insecure. I would remember him for a while after he walked out of the restaurant, but he wouldn't even remember me after I left the table. The thought was depressing.